Oh, hey. Merry Christmas and welcome to the Homeless Consultants channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And today I have an exceedingly difficult and important video to make for you. First, the preliminaries. It is Christmas, as I said. My employer isn't open on Christmas. This year they're not open on New Year's either. And they shifted the hours up again, as they did on Thanksgiving, on Christmas Eve, and they will do so on New Year's Eve. So that means over Christmas and over New Year's, I get to just sit in this car for almost 48 hours. Because I can't afford the hotel. I can't afford it. So this is my Christmas. I left the parking garage maybe 4:30 in the morning. Drove to a big, huge empty parking lot. Set this camera up for time lapse to demonstrate how there's really no traffic in Minnesota on Christmas. It's the one day of the year where everything's just, nothing's moving really. I mean, there's a car here and there. There's a little more now than I'm used to seeing, to be honest. But at that time, there was nothing on the road. And I was able to work on the script for this video for a couple hours. It was around, I don't know, 7:30 or so, 7:30. And again, I'm in this big parking lot, strip mall. Nothing's going to be open on Christmas. Not one thing in there. And as the time lapse shows, there's almost no cars at all coming. But then, after 2 hours or so, a car came, and it pulls into this empty parking lot, pulls right behind my car, facing my car. Out of this big empty parking lot I was in on Christmas morning. It's called being chased. It's how I spend my life. So I pack everything up, I start the car, again for my own safety, because only a creep would do that, and I leave. And I drive about 5 miles and burn some more gasoline. I had to go to the bathroom very badly. I knew that there's a laundromat up there. I went up to the laundromat. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. On the way in, on the way between that 5-mile drive, first of all, there were only a few cars out there. There was only one car actually on the road with me, but there were other cars in different places. One of them was at Starbucks. Starbucks was already open, selling their $5 cups of coffee. Just no respect for Christmas at all, as you would expect from Starbucks. And Minnesotans were more than willing to go pay $5 for a cup of coffee. They didn't give that $5 to the gentleman I'm about to tell you about. As I'm driving up to that laundromat for those 5 miles or so, there's only one car on the road with me on my lane of traffic. And of course, it tailgates me. Tailgates me for about a mile, then it does that reckless little lane change and cutting me off, 10 feet in front of my car thing, and just takes off like a rocket. And by a mile later, he was so far ahead I couldn't even see where he was. He was miles away. Didn't get pulled over. I didn't see a police officer with the lights going, pulling him over. I get to the laundromat. I have to go to the bathroom. I'm grateful I don't see any cars out there, which is very rare. I've actually got a pickup truck parked over here in this empty lot facing me. We'll see if I get this video done. There's no cars in the parking lot. I'm grateful. I get out of the car, I go into the laundromat, and there's a homeless man in the laundromat trying to stay warm. He's got all these clothes on, he's got a backpack sitting on the chair, and he's just sitting there and just kind of looks up at me, just the saddest eyes you ever saw, and just goes back down to nap. Those people spending $5 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks, they're not giving it to him. It's more important that they have a $5 cup of coffee. I leave the laundromat. I go to a public facility here in this town. Skating rink, all that kind of stuff. Closed, not open today. I start setting up to make this video. Probably 2 minutes after I arrived, and while I'm getting everything set up, a car pulls in. There's no cars on the road, folks. A car pulls into this place, sits there and just faces me for a few seconds, and then turns basically right in front of me and just parks there. called being chased. I packed everything up again, and I drove here. And I hope I can get anything done with this spooky person. Oh gosh, he's wearing a camouflage coat. That's just great. Christmas morning in Minnesota when you're homeless. Next week it's going to start getting down below zero. Way below zero. Like -10. And it's going to stay that way for 2 or 3 months. What this video is about concerns something I've had to think about and realize and admit over the past several months. As 2022 approaches, I'm just going to have to talk fast to get this video done, folks. I've had to come to the realization that it is very possible, I think likely, but very possible, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball. It's very possible, though, that 2022 will be the year that I leave this earth. And now, with this asinine vaccine mandate, I'm probably going to lose my job about 10 days from now because of that. Because of this ridiculous lunatic government trying to save me when I never asked to be saved. They're going to destroy me instead, and countless other people. Folks, I'm as good as dead. As far as I'm concerned, I've already been murdered. I was murdered by various perpetrators throughout the state of Minnesota over the last 10 years. Ever since my neighbors started to torture, terrorize, and torment me inside my home. That was about 10 years ago. That's 10 years of my life I have had to deal with this in some capacity. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, Paul, there's 5.5 million people in Minnesota. Murder can't be that wrong if 5.5 million people are perfectly happy and content to do this to you and to allow it to happen to you and to do nothing to stop it. Murder can't be that bad. Think about it, Paul. 5.5 million people are gonna... Right, it can't be that bad. Well, here's the thing, folks. Imagine that you have a 20-year-old, male or female, male. You have a 20-year-old man, 20 years old, just getting started in life. Or 18, he's 18 years old. Someone comes along with a baseball bat and beats him to within this far of death. That 18-year-old enters a coma. Now, in theory, it is not implausible to say that that person could end up in a coma for the rest of their natural life, and their natural life could be as long as it would be otherwise. It is very possible. The longest that human beings live in this day and age, roughly, and it's very rare, but it could happen, about 120. Let's say he passes away at 118 years old. That's 100 years, a century, that he would have been in a coma. And yet, technically, he didn't die. So he was not murdered by that person with the baseball bat. But his life was taken away, wasn't it? In the time that person's in a coma, people can be born, have children, have grandchildren, have great-grandchildren, and die at an old age while that one person is sitting in a coma. And yet, legally, that person was never murdered. The reason that murder is wrong, folks, the reason that universally, at least outside of Minnesota, throughout all of human history that I can discern, murder has been considered wrong and a punishable offense, very serious punishment. The punishment fitting the crime, for example. The reason murder's wrong is because it is a special case of assault. If I just go up and beat you with a baseball bat, I should be going to jail. I should be going to prison. I should be removed from society so that I can't do that to anybody else again. Murder is a special case of that. It's where you do that kind of assault, but then the biological clock inside of the victim just turns off. Biologically, they're dead. They cease to exist. But you know what, folks? We all die. You will die. I will die. They will die. He will die. Everyone is going to die. Everybody has died. Probably hundreds of billions of people who have lived before us have all died. Death is not the problem. We will die. It's how you live that matters. But if someone takes away your life, you can't live. By definition. That's why murder's a problem. Murder is a form of assault, and in the case of negligent homicide, it's a form of negligence. I could have stopped that person. That person with the baseball bat, I had a loaded gun in my hand. And when I saw him go up to strike that person's skull the first time, I could have just taken him out, but I didn't do it. I just sat there and watched instead. I pulled out my camera and filmed it, like the Minnesotans, that one woman who, when I woke up in my car one day, she's in front of the car filming me, and she has her, 11, 12-year-old daughter on this side filming me. But they didn't help me. What if I do that while this person's being beat up? Am I guilty of negligent homicide at that point? I think I'm guilty of something. Because I had a loaded gun. If I didn't have a loaded gun, it's another story. But sometimes things are very cut and dried. What if you're a police officer and it is your job to stop that person with a baseball bat, and instead you just sit back and watch and beat that person to a pulp? Have you committed a crime? Were you complicit in that person's death or that person being put in a coma? This stuff is really, really straightforward, folks. It has been straightforward back to before ancient Egypt existed. Taking away another person's life is punishable by having your life taken away. That's the way it's supposed to be. Because that way, you can never go out and take any other person's life ever again. Because you're gone. You're 6 feet under. You're decomposed into dust. You can't hurt anybody anymore. But in our society, and especially in the state of Minnesota, murder, legally, the legal definition of murder is to cause death. And yet, here's the thing. Even though the legal definition is to cause death, to cause the biological, the heart stops beating, the blood stops flowing, the brain waves stop, your body dies. It starts to decompose. That's causing death. That's what murder is in our legal system. And yet, the same people who prosecute people for murder, attorneys, lawyers, prosecutors, attorneys general's offices, the news media, the public, armchair specialists who know what happened in this crime, even though they weren't there, they just might have saw a little blurry video on YouTube or something. They don't know all the details, but they know it all. The jury, the judge, everybody refers to murder in other terms most of the time. Not always, most of the time. What I did was a Google search and a YouTube search on the word murder. You can do this yourself. You don't need to rely on me. Google it, YouTube it. And what I found was this, roughly, when people are describing a murder, I walk up to you, I pull out a loaded gun, shoot you in the head, your biological functions cease. You're dead, and you ain't coming back. When people describe that event, only about 1/4 of the time do they describe it in that legal sense, in terms of murder. About 1/4 of the other times they refer to it in some capacity, some variation on the phrase, I gotta take my gloves off, it's so cold. Some variation on the phrase that the person's life was ended. One person caused another person's life to end. About another 1/4 of the time, it is phrased in some variation of the phrase, a life was taken. The perpetrator took the life away from the victim. The other 1/4 of the time, it's some variation on the phrase, life cut short. The perpetrator cut the victim's life short. So 3/4 of the time, murder is phrased in terms of taking away life. Nothing to do whatsoever with biology, or the body dying, the heart stopping, brainwaves ceasing, decomposing. Nothing to do with that. 3/4 of the time, people describe murder in terms of taking away another person's life. And only 1/4 of the time do they describe it in terms of murder, the legal sense. And even then, when you look at it, what is it who's talking about it? It's either something dealing with a court, a legal case, news media reports. Normal human beings rarely refer to it as murder. They'll use the word murder, but even in the same paragraph, as you'll see, they'll explain what they mean by murder. And what they mean is to take a life. "6 years ago, after all those years of my neighbors torturing, terrorizing, tormenting me inside my own home, such that I'm laying on the floor curled up in the fetal position, I'm terrified to go home. When I pull my car into the apartment building, I'm just fight or flight all over me. I just dread the idea of going into my home, my safe place, because of what they're going to do to me when I'm in there. And I go to everyone for help. I start by going to the neighbors who are perpetrating this. They couldn't care less. They're doing it on purpose. What do they care? Me coming to them, asking them to stop is what they want. That's what they get off on. Minnesotans, passive aggressive. Talked about it relentlessly on these videos, as has just about everybody else who's moved to Minnesota who isn't a complete screw up to begin with. Those people get along fine with Minnesotans, but normal people who moved to Minnesota just search the internet again. Just search for Minnesota transplants and see what you get. They say the same thing I've been saying. I go to my landlord. He won't do anything. He just blames the victim. It's all my fault that they're dropping a refrigerator on my ceiling at 3 in the morning. Every 3 in the morning. I go to the police. I go to the city council. I go to attorneys. I go everywhere you possibly can. I go to churches. I go all the way up the government ladder to the governor's office and the attorney general's office. Nobody will do anything to help me. Not one person will do anything, even as I keep telling them, these people are taking my life away from me. They are taking my life. They have ended my productive life. Instead of living in my home, I'm curled up in a ball on the floor. I'm scared to go to my own home. And yet none of these people did anything about it. Including the Minnesota Attorney General's office. Let's look at something more recent from them, shall we? The Minnesota Attorney General's office never even bothered to respond to me. That's how much they cared. They didn't even respond. That was about 6 years ago. Just a few days ago, a Minnesota police officer was convicted of murder, manslaughter in this case. Kim Potter, she's going to prison now. Why? Well, let's ask the prosecutor. The prosecutor is the Assistant Minnesota Attorney General. This is someone who works with Keith Ellison. If you don't know who Keith Ellison is, you need to look that one up. The guy who was out there promoting the terrorist cookbook. Not a good person. Assistant Minnesota Attorney General Aaron Eldridge emphasized to the jury, this is the speech that the prosecution is using to convict this officer of murder. Quote, officers take an oath to protect life, not to take life. Unquote. This is the Attorney General's office, the one that I went to and said, somebody's taking my life. And they had nothing to say about it. Nothing. They never contacted me back. Ever. Ever. But now all of a sudden it's an issue. Because a white police officer shot a black perpetrator who was out doing crimes. And she's going to prison for it. She puts her neck on the line every single day to protect you and me. That's what these police officers do. And they get in a situation where they have to think fast, they don't know what's going on. Anything can happen, including you're so focused on whether or not that person has a weapon that you might not realize which of the weapons you pulled off your belt. It could certainly happen. How many times have you went to grab a pencil and all of a sudden in your hand you've got a big rubber eraser or a coffee cup and you look at it and you just go like, what was that all about? How many times has that happened to you? Why can't it happen to her? But they call that murder because the biological clock stopped in this punk who was trying to get away, who was trying to flee the police, which is illegal, by the way, breaking the law, but hey. And the Minnesota Attorney General's office frames the problem here, the reason that she needs to go to prison, the problem is that she took a life. Not that she murdered someone, she took a life. 2 years ago, the George Floyd killing started all these riots and protests, all that criminality that Governor Tim Walz just let happen, didn't care anything about. Let's see what people had to say about that, shall we? That was in the great state of Minnesota as well, the state that has taken my life. This is from the New York Post. Okay, they say, outraged at the killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. Killing, murder. There you go, legal definition. 2 paragraphs later, but if we truly believe that Black Lives Matter, we cannot and must not focus only on a small percentage of those lives taken. All of a sudden, this doesn't mean anything anymore, does it? Killing, murder. Nope, it is about taking life. That's the New York Post, folks. That liberal bastion. They frame it in terms of taking a life. You know, what happened to me, having my life taken away from me, where I'm stuck sitting in this car doing nothing with my existence. People magazine. Trevor Noah, whoever that is, reflects on George Floyd protests. Police in America are looting black bodies. Golly, these people have no priorities. Noah went on to address George Floyd, whose death, biological functions, has sparked nationwide protests. Really? Was it the biological function ceasing that sparked protests? What about my sister? She was 3 years old when she died due to medical malpractice from a fraudulent medical industry in this country. Nobody was out protesting when her death happened, did it? Nobody. No, they weren't protesting the death of George Floyd. Everybody dies. They were protesting the removal of his life, the ending of his life. And it says so right here. I lost it. It says so right here. The demonstrations began earlier last week in Minneapolis when footage of Floyd, an unarmed black man, folks, he was not unarmed. He was hopped up on all kinds of drugs that send you into a frenzy. He's big, muscular guy. He himself is a weapon, and when they came there, he was behind the wheel of a car. Do you recall just maybe a month ago, a guy who was similarly hopped up on drugs, driving through a parade and killing all those people, children and the elderly? That's what the police were trying to stop George Floyd from doing. But that police officer's sitting in a prison now. Why? Well, let's find out. He's sitting in a prison because, let's see, in the video, 3 other cops just stood by and did nothing as Floyd said repeatedly that he couldn't breathe and pleaded for the officer to stop. Folks, for years in that apartment, I pleaded with everybody to make this stop. I pleaded with my landlord to enforce his lease. I pleaded with attorneys to defend me, to stand up for me, get some justice. They wanted nothing to do with it, no money in it. I pleaded with the police to enforce the law. I pleaded with the city council to make the police enforce the law. I pleaded with all these agencies all the way up to the top. None of them did anything whatsoever. But here they're complaining that in the video, 3 cops, authorities, government, stood by and watched as he repeatedly said he couldn't breathe, which, by the way, you can't shout the phrase, "I can't breathe," if you can't breathe. Because if you can't breathe, the best you can do is say, "I can't breathe." You see, that's just biology and physics and science, things like that. The guy could breathe because he was shouting, "I can't breathe." People who know how to think would figure this one out. But me? What did I have? I had 7,000 hours of recordings proving the kind of torture I was subjected to inside my home. I had videos that would show when that fat lady next door would slam that door, which she did multiple times every day for years. How everything on my walls would shake, how the water would start moving in my fish tank, how my guinea pig would jump and just freak out. I had all the proof in the world of what they were doing. All you've got here is a video of someone who has a knee near a neck, which is what you have to do to prevent the neck from moving up. That's not the same thing as compressing the knee into the neck. And if it was compressed so that he couldn't breathe, he couldn't shout out, "I can't breathe!" Because he can't breathe. You can't shout when you can't breathe. I'm not going to focus on that anymore. You should have known that a long time ago, and so should the jury. And so should the prosecutors in Minnesota, who I bet do know that perfectly well. They're willing to sacrifice a police officer and put him in prison when he was trying to stop this drug addict, counterfeiter, from doing what happened in that parade. There was a black man on the ground in handcuffs, and you could take his life. So you did. People Magazine. You could take his life. Framing murder, death, killing as what? Taking a life. That's why Derek Chauvin should have gone to prison, because he took a life, according to these people. How many of us human beings can take the life of another human being and have firing be the worst thing that happens to us? Well, folks, how many of you can do that? Let's see. 5.5 million Minnesotans either took my life or sat by and did nothing as I yelled and screamed and begged and pleaded for somebody to stop it, and nobody did anything. So I would say at least 5.5 million human beings can take the life of another human being, and oh no, they didn't have firing as the worst thing that happened to them. They had nothing happen to them. Nothing. The perpetrators are probably still living in that apartment building, while I'm sitting in this car for now almost 7 years. Next up, LA Progressive. Oh, brother. So we got a story here from a man who sounds like a woman. And what does this guy have to say about George Floyd? Only then will the life taken from George Floyd and all the other innocent martyrs. Innocent martyrs? The guy was drugged. He was on drugs behind the wheel of a car, which means a weapon, a loaded gun, essentially, as that parade proves. And he's passing counterfeit bills. Innocent martyrs? How about someone who sits and minds his own business inside his own home and doesn't bother anybody, and the things he's working on at home are meant to improve conditions for the human species? Wouldn't that be an innocent murder? While his neighbors are torturing and terrorizing him every day? George Floyd, an innocent martyr? Only then will the life taken from George Floyd. Taking his life was the problem, not murder, not stopping his body. Next up, this Kyle Rittenhouse. Thanks to these ridiculous riots that started with the George Floyd, they spill over into Wisconsin. This kid goes out there to help protect and defend his community from these criminal rioters, law-breaking, violent criminal rioters, and he gets put in a situation where, what would you do if you're surrounded by these creeps, these just subhuman rioters, just looking like human animals running around, half of them armed? What would you do? I don't know what I would do. That's what he did. He defended himself. He's found innocent of it. What happens then? Well, some NASCAR driver named Bubba Wallace, he says, "Ha, let the boy be black and it would have been life. Hell, he would have had his life taken before the bullshit trial." Sad. He would have had his life taken. So I can only guess, since this isn't really very good English at all, but I don't think Bubba went to school here, but I presume what he's talking about is having your life taken, being murdered, being killed. He's saying they're equivalent. Having your life taken is equivalent to being murdered. And lastly on this topic, after the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, our good friend Colin Kaepernick, the one who I made a video to, A Homeless Man's Challenge to Colin Kaepernick, He hasn't taken up that challenge yet, has he? He's still out there whining and moaning and just acting like a little child about all this racist stuff, when the video I made for him demonstrates perfectly clearly that if he thinks black people have a problem, he needs to try being homeless for a while and see how that goes for him. Because the only oppressed class left in this country who is completely ignored by the law, completely deprived of all rights, is the homeless. Colin Kaepernick, Mr. Big Hair, what does he do? He says, we just witnessed a system built on white supremacy. Right. Really? I'm white. Does this look like a supreme way of living, Colin Kaepernick, you idiot? You brain-dead fool. What is wrong with you, man? What is wrong with you? That guy sitting in the laundromat was as white as snow. That homeless guy. What is wrong with you? You idiot. God, money cannot buy brains, can it? I don't even want to finish this idiot's statement. Whatever, you get the point I'm trying to make here. Colin Kaepernick isn't even worth talking about. Moving right along, folks. I think I've made the point, and I will make it again, that many people, including the very people who are charged with dealing with things like murder and killing, manslaughter, negligent homicide, the people who deal with that, they constantly, endlessly, over and over frame it in terms of taking away life, not in terms of causing death, until they get in a courtroom and they have to deal with the little dotting the I's and crossing the T's of our legal system. But the problem, the reason they're hauling people into court is because they took a life, not because they killed somebody. I'm going to give you one more here. If I can find it, one more. How about this one? This is talking about a suspicious death, shall we say, a news report. Reeves at once called in Constable Barrett and Dr. Keeling of Brick Lane, made an examination of the woman, and pronounced life extinct. Life extinct. Didn't pronounce her dead, he pronounced her as having had her life taken away. This is a news report about Jack the Ripper from 1888. This isn't something new, folks. People have always described murder in terms of taking away life. Taking away someone's life. If you... Elizabeth Smart, these kids who are kidnapped and they're put in a prison, in a dungeon, that freak show in Austria who put his daughter in a dungeon below their house so he could rape her for what, 20, 30 years? He didn't kill her, but he was still guilty of a crime because he took away her life. Let's move on to part 2. I'm going to give you the evidence that according to what I just told you as the definition of murder, which is to take away life, that I have been murdered by the state of Minnesota. Let's look at health, first of all. I have told you repeatedly in these videos, that I have not been sick in years. That is true. When I've worked and I've flown on planes with other people, my colleagues get sick, they're gone for the next 3 days after a flight because they're sick, I'm just fine. I can walk into a room, meeting room, standing room only, people in there sick, taking off work, flu, bouncing around, I don't get it. Since I stopped using our corrupt healthcare system about 30 years ago, I haven't gotten sick. But folks, I have never once claimed, and I have also attributed much of that, if not all of it, to Almighty God. That is a blessing from God. I'm not a miracle worker. I don't have a secret recipe or a formula to hand you and say that you're going to get the same result if you do what I did here. I am very fortunate, but there's no denying, from the moment I stopped using our corrupt healthcare system, I stopped getting sick. Before that, I got sick all the time. You can't deny this. There's a correlation there that cannot be denied. Even though I haven't been sick, though, that does not mean that the laws of nature are suspended. It means that I have a very strong immune system because I haven't let our corrupt and incompetent and malpracticing medical system screw up my immune system with things like vaccines, for example. I haven't allowed that. So I don't get sick. My body does it. The body that God created with an immune system that works. That's why I don't get sick. But it doesn't change the laws of biology and physics and physiology. Folks, my body has absolutely been destroyed over the last 7 years that I've been in this car. Absolutely decimated. Just because I don't get sick, because I don't get a contagious disease so that I have to call into work and I have perfect attendance, that doesn't mean I'm not slowly dying. When I was still in my apartment, I had to stop using the exercise equipment. I've told you in other videos. I had the exercise equipment in the living room. I had to stop using it because I couldn't stand to be in that living room with all that violent noise and shaking and everything. Couldn't do it. So for a year or so, I stopped using all that, and I just get flabby. I lose all that tone I had. You look at the videos of me drumming right about that time, right before I moved to Minnesota, I look like an Olympian. But within about a year of me not being able to exercise anymore in that apartment, I'm just out of shape completely. I go to our company's picnic. I jump to catch a Frisbee, which is something I could do my whole life. I was only, about 42, 44 at the time. Perfectly agile. I've always been extremely agile. Running hurdles, things like that, and wrestling in high school. I mean, and I fall down and rip my shoulder apart, and I still have this shoulder sticks up about half an inch. I can't use this arm to lift heavy things anymore. That was while I was still in the apartment. That would not have happened if I had been in the kind of shape I was in a year prior, when I was able to exercise, constantly working in my muscles, including the shoulder muscles. And that's while I was in the home. Since I've been living in this car, my body has been absolutely destroyed. I have had almost no nutritious food for 7 years. I'm eating ramen noodles almost every single day. I'm drinking this sugar water because I have to try to regulate my sleep to conform with what goes on around me, like this creep in a truck who's sitting there with his headlights on me. I can't afford to fall asleep right now because that guy might come over and stick some of his anatomy inside my mouth if I do. That's the kind of weirdo you got sitting in here on Christmas morning. So I have to drink this to stay awake. If I was in my home, I would just lay down and go to sleep, wouldn't I? But I can't do that. I have not had nutritious food. I have not had a kitchen where I can prepare food. 7 years. Do you have any idea what that does to a human body? I have had worse. I've had only the worst foods. Sugar, caffeine, water, carbohydrates almost exclusively. I have put on so much weight. When I was in high school, I wrestled in the 98 pound to 119 weight classes. Last time I weighed myself, and that was about a year ago, I believe I was 230 pounds. When I left that apartment, 1 year before, when I had to stop exercising, let me put it that way, I probably weighed about 160. It's the things that happen with this that have caused me to gain all this weight, because I've had to switch to a sedentary lifestyle. My teeth are completely destroyed. At least half, if not more than half of my teeth are either now gone and broken off at the gums, or they're cracked in half. They're all black up here. Everything is black. I've got a huge hole behind. You see that big dark one in the front, right where I smile? There's a huge hole in the back. It's just going to snap out at any time. All of that, since I started living in the car. All of it. You wonder why homeless people are out there and they call them toothless homeless people? Maybe it's something to do with that. Where do I brush my teeth when I have no hygiene facilities? The state of Minnesota built a football stadium instead of building hygiene facilities for the homeless. All my teeth are gone. Or will be. They're destroyed. They're absolutely destroyed. These blood clots I keep talking about in my legs, my groin, my upper legs, where every single day I have to grab all these paper towels and I have to sit there and squeeze all that blood out of it to the extent that I'm able. I have to buy those bandages over and over and over and put them all on me. Blood clots in your legs are not a good thing, folks. They're a sign of a problem. Maybe the problem is that I've had to sit in the seated position for 7 years. At work, I'm sitting in a chair in a cube, and all the rest of the time, I'm sitting in this car because this car keeps me alive. And if I leave this car for even a minute, some creep like this weirdo who's still sitting there with his headlights pointed at me might steal my car or hurt my car, which is to destroy my home. So I have to sit in this car for 7 years. That's why I have all these blood clots in my leg. What does that mean? No circulation. My hands get cold almost instantly now. I have almost no circulation in my body, and that hurts your body all around. I'll let you do the research to figure out what I'm talking about here. My voice is destroyed. I've told you that all along. As the holes open up in this car from rust over the years, the exhaust has come more and more into this car. As the engine has been destroyed, it starts burning more and more oil. So the chemicals that I'm breathing in are more and more, or not as much carbon monoxide. Now it's carbon monoxide mixed with all of these petrochemicals. Benzene, ethanol, all these horrifying chemicals. So my singing voice is gone forever. I can't sing. I can't sing, folks. I can't even control the vocal cords at most of the ranges I used to have. There's nothing there. I used to be able to sing Tiny Tim, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Tiptoe through the tulips. That note is so much higher than that. I used to be able to nail it. Been a long time since I rock and roll. Does that sound like good singing to you? I used to be able to sing that. Did you hear how quickly I ran out of breath? I used to be able to sing all that with full breath control throughout the length of those notes. That's how quickly I lose my breath now. Shortness of breath. Muscle atrophy everywhere, and yet at the same time my ankles are swollen to the point where it hurts physically to put socks on anymore. Any socks I have, no matter how big they are, they end up just tight, constricting because my ankles are so swollen. All my legs are swollen. My hands are swollen. I can't control some devices the way I used to be able to. I got another one out here. Unbelievable. Muscle atrophy all over my body. There's a very good chance, if you know what's going on, based on my living conditions and nutrition, that I'm looking at muscle atrophy and osteoporosis. You can feel it in your bones, as you would say. I know my body, and I know it well. My body was always a well-oiled machine. I kept it that way until those neighbors prevented me from being able to exercise inside my home. This metal bar in my back, right here. This metal bar. Swollen legs, swollen ankles, swollen hands. Things like playing guitar. Things like working small tools. If I'm working on guitars, which I can't do anymore anyway, but anything that uses those small tools, my hands just feel like balloons. Typing. My typing skills have gotten atrocious. I used to be the fastest typer you ever saw. Accurate. It's gone. No blood circulation means your immune system is taking a brutal beating. No respiration. I can't respire because the whole time I'm sitting in this seated position my whole life the last 7 years, my diaphragm is blocked. I can't breathe properly. I can't breathe fully. My respiration is destroyed. You just saw how much breath control I have. How long I can hold a note. La. That's how far I get out of it. 7 years ago, I could probably hold that note for what, 15, 20 seconds without it cracking, without it breaking. You know that song Miracles by Jefferson Starship? I couldn't quite hit it with the power he did at all. And the timbre of my voice always sucked. That was the problem. I could always sing and hit the notes from a full range, from very low to very high, but the timbre of my voice isn't the most pleasant to listen to when I'm singing. But I could sing. There was a time, before 7 years ago, when I could sing Miracles by Jefferson Starship. Listen to that song sometime and see, do you think I could do it today? Not when I'm sitting here with my diaphragm compressed for 7 years. My muscles become exhausted and ache after just moments of using them. Moments. Climbing stairs. Not only do I run out of breath by the time I'm at the top of the stairs because I have no respiration, I'm breathing in freaking petrochemicals 16 hours a day, carbon monoxide. But my legs themselves, from trying to walk up there, just hurt. My arms, my neck. Over the last year or so, increasingly, I've been having excruciating cramps. You ever been sitting there and like your leg cramps and your leg, you like stretch your leg out straight and you're just sitting there like, and it's the most painful thing you've ever felt and you just want to die and you just want this to end and you don't even know why it happened. That happens to me all the time now. I'll be sitting at work, I'll just be at work doing my thing, and all of a sudden my leg, and I'll have to do that. I'll have to stretch it out, and I roll my chair back, and I'm just sitting there trying not to scream so everyone else in there realizes that I'm just sitting there over and over and over again. Happens a couple times a week at work. It happens all the time in this car. Right now, I cannot reach back into this car. I used to be able to just reach back here and grab something if I wanted it. Now, if I do that and I stretch myself at all, I'll get one of those horrifying cramps up here in my chest. And then I'm like in this car and I'm just... And it just, I can't breathe and it feels like, not like George Floyd, but the real thing where I can't breathe. Minnesota. And it feels like I'm having a heart attack. Sometimes when I open the door and I step outside the car, just merely moving my leg to put it on the ground causes one of those cramps. And I just fall to the ground, or I sit there and I have to hold myself. This happens to me all the time now, increasingly. Because my body's being destroyed by sitting in this car. Find the mouse. Absolutely excruciating. Meanwhile, I have been having what can be described in no other way than chest pains. Not those kind of cramping, but what's going on below my ribs, like in my heart, for example. Chest pains. People out there like experts so much. Why don't you go consult the experts and ask them what's going to happen to a human body that has gone through what I've gone through the last 7 years? I had something here. Just some silly little ad. 10 signs of heart failure you should never ignore, according to doctors. Shortness of breath, leg swelling, weight gain, and more. I was healthy as a horse when I was in that apartment. Until those people took my life away from me, including the part of my life that enjoyed sitting down with all that exercise equipment, putting on some headphones, and exercising to the beat of that music, which kept me healthy. These people took my life. None of these things existed before my neighbors started doing that to me. Government right now is obsessed with using COVID as this pretense for taking over other people's lives and stealing their money. You know, companies will require their employees to get vaccinated, or else we're going to fine them into oblivion so the whole company disappears and everybody loses their job. That makes sense to these loony birds in government. That's how we save lives, is by destroying companies, destroying jobs, destroying everything people need to survive. And guess what, folks? My company is now considered to have more than 100 people in it. Which means that according to this asinine, unconstitutional, inhumane, in the extreme vaccine mandate, there's a very good chance I'm going to lose my job soon. Because again, for 30 years, the reason I haven't gotten sick is because I don't go to where sick people congregate. I don't go to the doctor's office to get a vaccine. I don't need it. I don't need anything messing up my immune system, which works. And I'm not going to allow it. To save my life, I'm not going to allow it. But this government will try to force me to do it. And I'll have to choose between my job and my life. And the irony is, when I choose my life, then I end up with no job. It's illegal for a homeless person to get a job without a resident address. You have to commit perjury, a felony, to fill out any of the paperwork to try to get a job. And where am I going to get a job now when I have no way to maintain my hygiene or anything? I only got the job I've had the last 6 years. What has it been? 6 years? 5 years? I've had that job because that family was kind enough, beautiful enough to bring me into their home for a while. That let me clean myself up and have a real address I could use without breaking the law. But I don't have that anymore. When this government takes away my job here at the beginning of January, if that happens, I have no money, I have no income, I have nothing. As I said before, it goes down to minus 10 degrees and colder. That's the beginning of how a person dies. That's why the homeless here have twice the mortality rate as the general population. And this idiotic government claims to be helping me. For these reasons alone, even if I won the lottery today, if someone came up and gave me $1 million, or that million isn't worth much anymore, if they gave me $50 million, guess what? I will never be able to have a family again. With my teeth destroyed, all these blisters down here, even if medical science could somehow fix this and I get dentures and I get all my teeth pulled out and replaced with something nice and shiny. One thing I was known for growing up, there were two things. My nickname was the Skeleton. That was my nickname. Remember, I didn't have all this weight because I didn't just sit around all the time. My nickname was the Skeleton. But also, the other thing I was known for was my big smile and laugh. Big, broad smile. Everyone would always say that. Paul's got such a big, broad smile. I can't smile anymore, folks. You're going to see nothing but black and broken teeth if I smile. You think I'm going to meet a lot of women out there with that? For the rest of my life, I will never be in any kind of relationship again. I will never have a family of my own. 7 years ago, that could not be said. I had as fair a chance as anyone 7 years ago. It's over. Forever. For eternity. In these years I've been in this car, I have not been able to practice guitar regularly. I cannot practice drums regularly. I can practice rudiments on a steering wheel. That's not the same thing as playing drums. When you're sitting in a drum set, you don't play it up like this on one thing. You're rotating your body, you're moving your feet, you're moving everything. I spent my lifetime, from the time I was a little kid, learning those skills. And they're gone. I can't play anywhere near as I used to be able to, and I will never get it back. Swollen hands, not a chance. It's over. It's gone. Everything I spent my life doing is gone, as of 7 years ago. When the state of Minnesota murdered me. When I died. When my life was taken away from me. That is also 7 years of me not adding new skills and mastering new skills and disciplines. Something I have done my whole life from the time I was a child. Almost every year there is something brand new, big, completely different discipline than I've ever encountered before that I enter and I start researching and studying and I master it. But not in the last 7 years, nothing. The only thing I've done in the last 7 years are these videos. For what, 30 or 50 views? So some psychopath in Minnesota can come in and put a thumbs down on my videos within 1 or 2 minutes of every video I post without even watching them. Some psycho who doesn't want you to hear the truth about Minnesota. That's not the same thing as the productive life I had before, folks. Making these videos compared to what I did before is easy, even in these conditions. You make it, you edit it, you post it. And if I had a home, you wouldn't believe the production value on here. All my other hobbies ceased. I mean, for one thing, I lost everything I had. I had to sell it for pennies on the dollar at pawn shops when I lost my home. Everything has ceased. Photography, gone. Haven't done it since. Animation, digital art. The last thing I did, the last thing I was starting to do 7 years ago, right before I lost my home, was I bought a program called Anime Studio Pro. And I was just starting to get into animation, 3D digital art. And I love it. And it's something I want to do. I'm just now trying to start it again, but I can't. I can't do anything in this car. Over those last 7 years, I would have mastered it to the point where right now I would be teaching other people how to do it. I promise you that. And instead, nothing over those last 7 years. Film studies. I had more than 2,000 DVDs when I had my home. And I watched them. And I watched the special features. And I studied. I didn't just watch the films. I studied how the films were made. I can't even watch a film anymore. If I have a couple DVDs back here. That one, I did a video, 2-3 years ago, where I was trying to watch that Muppet movie out in the middle of nowhere. It was like Christmas like this. And out of this whole parking lot, some idiot in a truck pulls in right next to my car. And I literally just take the computer and throw it, and I put the thing in gear, and I don't know what they're doing. Who would do that? And I never finished the Muppet movie. I never even saw the end of that thing. That was years ago. You saw the video here on this channel when that happened. I can't watch a film, folks. How do I do it? I can't go 2 hours sitting in this car without being molested by some nut job like this. Or at least having the police come over, even if they're kind and good police and they're coming over to just check on me. It's still an interruption. Puppetry and ventriloquism. Gone. I can't do anything with that anymore. I was lucky I could get a couple of those puppets, the one you saw, for $6 a piece. But I'm not building puppets. I'm not... All kinds of arts and crafts. Can't even count. Carpentry. Building things. Guitar modifications. Customization. Gone. I can't do it. I live in a car. Music mashups and remixes. I've done maybe 3 or 4, and they're not very good compared to what I used to do. I just don't have the setup. I can't do it. Synthesizers, drum machines, MIDI control. Gone. It's just gone. I can't work on that stuff living in a car. Studying history and biographies. I don't think I've done it other than watching some YouTube videos. I haven't done anything in 7 years on that. Linguistics. Nothing. Synthesis of all these interests into original ideas and new disciplines. That's what I did, folks. From the time I was a kid, I learned all these various things that I was so fascinated with. Astrophysics and arts and crafts. And in my mind, I could put them together into something that's new and original. All that ended 7 years ago. It's over. It's done. They took my life. My life ceased 7 years ago. And according to how everyone describes murder out there, that is murder. I have been unable to continue any academic studies of any kind. And by that, I mean hard and fast research where you're digging into really technical, in-depth, even academic journals if needed. Mathematics, out the window. Neuroscience. One of the questions I always wanted to answer from the time I was a kid until I died. One of the questions I wanted to answer, and I'm not saying I have an answer, I don't, but I've been trying my whole life until 7 years ago. What are dreams? What are dreams? What are they? Neuroscience has been a fascination of mine from the time I was a kid. I kept a dream log up until about 7 years ago. Can you guess why in the last 7 years it's been a little difficult? A whole lifetime of dreams interrupted for 7 years. Keeping up with junk science developments. You've got to keep up with that. When you spend 30 years studying junk science, you've got to stay on top of it if you're going to try to defeat that evil. DNA and genetics, physics, astronomy, astrophysics. The second question I've always wanted to answer, and again, I don't think I would ever be able to anyway, but I wanted to keep trying. What is gravity? We can describe gravity, we can use gravity, we can manipulate machines because we can rely on gravity. We understand how it functions and the laws, but nobody knows what gravity even is. Nobody knows. I wanted to be the one to find out. And again, I'm not saying I would have been. I probably wouldn't have, statistically, but I should have been allowed to spend the last 7 years trying. Like I did the first 40 some odd years. Monitoring the cult of academia, similar to junk science. How can I monitor the cult of academia when I'm living in a car? That ended 7 years ago. Rhetoric, propaganda, crowd and herd mentality, cults, human manipulation, the thing that allows a Nazi party to rise, the thing that allows this kind of idiocy we're seeing in this country today to rise. Been studying that since 1988 when I lost someone I loved dearly to a cult. 7 years ago, stopped. While you people were watching television and drinking beer, while you were out just goofing off all the time, for 30 years I'm out there studying this stuff every single day, becoming what I think is one of the world experts on this topic, and 7 years ago, it stopped. Why did it stop? Because the state of Minnesota took my life away, which is murder. Fighting against student loan racketeering, trying to free not just one generation, but multiple generations from that ball and chain that is not only destroying their lives, but it's destroying the country. Because all these people who are going out there and doing all that effort in school to master these disciplines and gain these skills, and then they've got a ball and chain on them, so they can't do anything with it. I was one of the few people who was really fighting aggressively against that. 7 years ago, stopped. Similarly, government corruption and lobbying. I never let that stand. If I see it, I will bring it up. Noise pollution. Remember when my neighbor started doing this to me, that opened up a new arena that I had to start studying and mastering. And I did. And I became an expert on it. The impact of noise and noise pollution on human beings. There are people out there studying it. I've showed you before. There's journal articles dedicated to it called Noise and Health. The website I created when I first became homeless. Now it's long gone because I couldn't come up with $30 to renew it. All that work I put in there for over a year, not just hundreds of hours, probably in the low thousands of hours of work I put into that. Over about 3 years. It was well before I left the home that I started on that. The website was more or less done when I lost my home. Couldn't come up with $30 to keep that website. All of it just gone. They took my life away. From the time I moved to Minnesota in 2007 until the year 2015 when I lost my home, that's 8 years, I built a home audio and video studio. Something I'd wanted to do my whole life. And I built a good one, and I never got to use it. What I had planned to do with that was things like sound design. Do you know how much money you can make designing sounds? You put them online, someone in a Hollywood film grabs it, they'll pay $1,000 for something that just goes whoosh! And I know how to do that. Original music, loops, samples, jingles, things that people use in their music, especially hip-hop and this kind of construction music. And instead of melodic music that you just create, you just cut and paste things together. You know how much money they pay for that stuff? Jingles. You know, if you come up with a loop or a sample or a jingle that gets used on a national commercial, you know how much money you get paid for doing that? I know how to do it. I was going to do it. That's what the studio was for. Making music videos for bands. I have made a few music videos in the past and they came out really good. I love doing it. And it helps the bands tremendously to have a product like that to sell themselves. I love music. I was in bands. Ended. Likewise, wedding videos. Throughout my adult life, as far as I know, anytime I've gone to someone's wedding, my gift to them was to do their wedding video for them. And they came out good. I love doing that. Such a special time for people. Ended. My studio's gone. Podcasting. I was one of the first podcasters when podcasting started back around the year 2000. I had a show where I interviewed musicians when I lived in San Diego. RSS feeds, all that stuff. No one had ever even heard of podcasting back then. I was one of the first. I learned it. I mastered it. I was one of the original people, one of the pioneers in that. And I wanted to get back into it. Nothing. Ethical business. The first videos on this channel are about business, specifically ethical and moral business. I wanted to have something related to that. A book, a pamphlet. I wanted to pursue that somehow because it needs to be said. Ended. Completely ended. The animation I told you about, the last thing I bought of any significance at all, and it was only like $79 even then, before I lost my home, was Anime Studio, where I was going to learn animation. There's so much to that. It's a whole discipline, folks. It's a whole discipline. 2D animation, 3D animation, rendering, all the stuff that goes with it. I was just getting started learning that and becoming a master to where today I would be teaching it. Instead, nothing happened for 7 years. I'm just now trying to get back into it, and I can't focus, and everywhere I go I get stalked, or some creep comes up near me forcing me to leave for my safety, because I can't just sit in a home and focus and concentrate. YouTube channels. I was going to have a music gear review channel. Back at that time, there weren't that many out there, and they weren't really established. In 7 years, do you know what's happened, folks? In 7 years, what do you have now? Daryl Braun Guitar, Tone King. You've got an established group of maybe 5 or 10 gear reviewers who are able to quit their jobs and do that full time. And all they do is grab gear or get gear sent to them by manufacturers, and they do really good reviews and entertaining reviews of it. And I knew how to become one of those people. One of the innovators, one of the pioneers of that. I knew how to do it. That's why I had a studio. Ended 7 years ago. And now you've got 5 or 10 people who are so established, if anything, that whole market is saturated. I will never be able to enter that, ever. Never can I knock those people off their pedestal now. No matter what I produce, I could produce the best thing in the world. It doesn't matter. 7 years is a lifetime when it comes to that kind of social media stuff. That dream is over. I was planning to leave Minnesota, as I told you all along. Of course, I wanted to leave Minnesota. That's why in the world would I want to stay here? But I didn't just want to leave and not have a plan. I was trying to move down to Route 66 because I love and adore and want to preserve Americana. And I wanted to start a music store. I wanted to get a trailer or a small house. I don't even want a big house. I never have wanted a big one. And I wanted to open up a music store, an online music store, put all this stuff together, make enough money to survive at that level. And I could have done it. I was about a year away from really feasibly having a chance of leaving this state and doing it. Every bit of that, everything I just mentioned, ended 7 years ago when I lost my home. It was all destroyed. Instead, for nearly 7 years, I have worked at stupid, pointless, meaningless jobs. The jobs I've had since losing my home have just... let's just say they don't contribute to a life that is worth living. I have done nothing with those hobbies of any substance or significance. I have done nothing with any of those projects. Books, videos, teaching, training, anything I was working on, nothing. All of which were in some capacity potentially income generating projects. What have I been doing for 7 years? I've been sitting in this car, doing a stupid job, being abused at work, exploited at work from every single direction, and then coming out and sitting in a car for 16 hours. And yet, I became homeless because of attacks and negligence from other people. My neighbors attacked me inside my own home. The people whose jobs it were, who they accepted paychecks to put a stop to that, such as the landlord, who had me and them sign a lease that he wrote, which clearly had a big paragraph saying you can't do that to your neighbors. He wouldn't do anything about it. the police, who had scrolls and scrolls of laws, noise ordinances, which they would enforce for perhaps the mayor or their friend. The police up there in North Minneapolis, nope, they wouldn't do it for me. The city council, whose job it is to make sure that this kind of horrific living condition does not exist in their community, did nothing. That viciously inhumane medical company I worked for at the time, who, the week of Thanksgiving, for heaven's sakes, without any advance warning of any kind whatsoever, just fires a whole bunch of their very best people because they got a new president who wasn't very good at what he does. He didn't even know who the best people were. The idiot fired the best people he had. And then fled with his golden parachute, leaving someone else to clean up the mess. Losing my job at that particular time is one of the main primary reasons I ended up in this situation. That medical company that claims to help and save lives helped to murder me. They took my life away. Lazy, irresponsible police departments up there. Again, south of Minneapolis, I've been very happy with the police out here. God bless them and keep them safe. A Minnesota Bar Association that is filled with the laziest, dumbest, most useless group of attorneys I have encountered anywhere in this country. What do they even exist for? They don't do anything. They'll just ambulance chasers, fill out the same forms, repeat throughout their lives. They will not step outside of a box and say, oh my gosh, here's a problem that needs fixing. It needs justice, not just for this person, but it will help all these people, like noise pollution and neighbors who terrorize other neighbors. They don't see it that way. These attorneys are useless. The Bar Association is absolutely useless. They don't care about truth. They don't care about justice. They don't care about other people. Which is how Minnesotans are. And these are Minnesota attorneys. Do you see a pattern? What about the churches I went to? That first church I went to for help before I became homeless to stop, what did the pastor say? Maybe we'll see your stuff on Storage Wars. And that's probably the best performance I got from any church over all these years. 501c3 tax-exempt churches, building these huge multi-million-dollar facilities, little golf carts running around, because they're too lazy to walk from here to there, across their giant campus. Nothing to do with Jesus, nothing to do with the Bible, and yet their charter claims they are doing this because of Jesus and the Bible. The same Jesus who said, above all else, help thy neighbor, help thy neighbor. And these people will do nothing except give me a pamphlet of government social services. Social services is the next one on the list. Something even I didn't really realize at the time I became homeless. What an absolute total fraud it is. A useless tax-wasting fraud. Doesn't help anybody except people in social services. Everything about social services is corrupt to the core. It's not to say that the John and Jane Doe working in social services are bad people. They enter the field hoping they're going to be able to help people and all this, but the system is just fundamentally flawed. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The whole point of social services in a big picture is to serve social services, to maintain their job, not mine, to maintain their home so they don't become homeless, not to take me and get me out of homelessness. The more homeless people they have, the more job security they have. Maybe that's why everything they do seems geared toward creating and maintaining homelessness instead of stopping it. These people murdered me. They took away my life. I spent the first couple years, at least this first year of being homeless, wasting it on social services. That's when I was selling off everything I owned for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. One of the things I had was a fantastic guitar collection. Thousands and thousands of dollars in this guitar collection. They were fantastic because guitars are traditionally not a good investment. They don't really go up in price that much unless you get really lucky. But I got smart. Almost every guitar I had not just went up in price, but went up significantly. If I could have sold those things for what they were worth at that time, I would have profited by thousands of dollars. Instead, I had to sell every one of them for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar! Do you understand? I spend $500 for a guitar. The price goes up to where it sells for maybe $750, and I get $75 for it, which keeps me alive for less than 1 week in this car. For all those guitars I had. Those were going to be the basis of the music store. Social services. They are basically doing the same thing that the medical frauds do, that the pharmaceutical industries do. They basically are doing human experimentation on a massive scale. We'll just try this. I've got it in my head. I came up with this brilliant idea. I'm going to call it data-driven decisions. And they come up with some stupid idea that just plain doesn't work. But it doesn't matter because they're not going to lose their job. It's just all the people they were supposed to help in social services who don't get the help. They get destroyed because of it. And if you come across something where you can cook the books and use rhetoric and propaganda and manipulative language to present it as if the thing, your ridiculous idea did work, you become a hero, even though you didn't do anything but hurt people. Social services, absolute fraud. Every which way to Sunday. Complete, utter fraud. They decide, social services, they are the ones who decide who they are going to help and who they are going to ignore. And they do so based on their own personal biases and preferences, such as, what sex are you? Are you male or female? I prefer to help females, not men. Men can just go to hell. What race are you? I don't want to be seen as a racist, so if you're white, you can just go burn in hell because I'm going to help these black people instead. Even if they're not even citizens and they just came in on a boat from Africa, these Somalis who come over here, they don't want to work, they don't want to integrate with Americans, they don't want to do anything, they don't know anything about American history like I know inside and out and backwards, and can quote, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary. I know this stuff. They won't even look at it. But social services will help them because I don't want to appear as a racist. The first thing these people did when they got off the boat was break the law by entering the country illegally. They're lawbreakers. They're criminals. I didn't break the law. I went by the book. And they won't help me. Those people get homes, they get cars, they get anything they want. Walking around with these expensive phones. Unbelievable. And they even got one of them elected into the U.S. Congress. U.S. Congress, where they affect your life no matter what state you live in. Have you heard the name Ilhan Omar? Minnesota is the one who put her there. The state that killed me. The state that murdered me. The news media completely ignored my story. Off camera, they made it perfectly clear that they don't even care. It didn't mean anything to them. My suffering... Anything I was trying to say about how noise pollution affects other people as well, affects everybody, they didn't care. And off camera, they are perfectly happy to just tell you flat out, I don't care. Go away. On camera, no. They pretend for the sake of Minnesotans who are not apparently very smart, they pretend to care about these things. And they know all the tactics to fool these Minnesotans. One of them even calls itself Care 11 with a K, because that's so cool. You know, like cool spelled with a K. We'll call it Care 11, even though they say, I don't care when I come to them off camera with something like this. And can you believe it, folks? I don't know if I've ever even told you this one. I even went to the FBI at one point. The government here was so corrupt to the core. I went to the FBI, but you know what? The FBI said, well, you have to go to your regional, or however they define it. You have to go to your agency for the state. In other words, I had to go to the freaking Minnesota FBI, which is populated with Minnesotans. How well do you think that went? The same as with the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, everyone else. They never even bothered to respond. Never even responded! Your tax dollars at work, folks. Governor Tim Walz, his stay-at-home order, which didn't even bother to take into consideration the fact that homeless people exist and that maybe if you don't have a home, you can't stay at home. And a stay-at-home order might create the conditions that could cause 20,000 homeless people to suffer tremendously, maybe even to die. I don't think for a minute that Tim Walz was out there trying to attack homeless people. I think the guy is so oblivious, it never even occurred to him. He doesn't even think in terms of homeless people existing. So he implements a stupid idea like a stay-at-home order, and it never even entered his head that this is going to destroy the lives of homeless people, especially working homeless people who can't work at home. But that's what this whole government is. They don't even think in terms of homeless people. Homeless people are ignored. That's what I was telling Colin Kaepernick in that video. A homeless man's challenge to Colin Kaepernick. If you're black, everybody in this government is buzzing and screaming and yelling and talking, oh, black, racism, blah, blah, blah. That's the only thing on their mind. But they don't even think about homeless people. They ignore it as if homeless people don't exist. There's 4 million homeless people in the United States. And Biden's vaccine mandate and OSHA, this monstrosity OSHA that instead of doing the moral thing and obeying their civic duty like their ancestors did and standing up and saying, there's no way in hell we're going to enforce this law. It opposes every principle that this country was founded on. You can't tell these people over there you have the right to control your body, so you can just murder the human being who's in your belly. You can just murder that child, that helpless, defenseless child, because it's your right to determine what goes on with your body. But then over here, I'm going to tell these people, okay, some industry that has a couple 100-year history of human experimentation without people's knowledge that is so corrupt to the core, it controls our government, the pharmaceutical industry, if you haven't figured it out. All the human experimentation they've done, constantly releasing stuff that they'd have no idea what it's going to do to people. And we're going to order you to put that concoction into your body, even if you haven't been sick in the last 30 years, because your immune system already works. And if you refuse to do it, we're going to cost you your job, which is to cost you your life. And we're doing it to save lives. OSHA. Your government at work. Your government at work. Throughout all of this, over not just 7 years again, but 10 years since these neighbors started doing this, and I had to start for 3 years while I was in the home trying to fight against this. These vicious monsters, everyone I'm describing here that I've went to, they just did nothing but add to my trauma over and over and over again. They showed a clear lack of concern for whether I lived or died. None of them ever showed any concern. Not one of them ever just sat there and, you know the look on someone's face when, I mean, if I came running up to you and I said, there's a child trapped behind this car, under this car wheel. As soon as I say that, your whole complexion's going to change. You're going to be like, a child's life's in danger, and everything changes. With these people, I can sit there and I can go over this. I can show them 7,000 hours of recordings. I can show them enough evidence for any court of law to side with me if you had competent attorneys who would take on the case. And their demeanor doesn't change one bit. The only thing that changes is that they start tapping their toe and they start looking at their watch, and you can just see them just, boy, I wish this guy would shut up. I wish he'd finish. I wish he'd quit telling me about how he's being tortured. I really want to get to lunch. I got to get a $5 cup of coffee at Starbucks. That's the only thing. Nobody has cared about what has happened here. Which is why I can claim 5.5 million Minnesotans are complicit in my murder. They don't care. In all these years, the only people I have had who care are what? There was one family at a church who bought a car battery for this car. What they did by buying me that battery was just unfathomably significant. It changed completely the way that I live. Just like that, for the better. One simple, compassionate act from that family. The family that took me into their home for such a long time. Such wonderful, good people. And I just couldn't stay there. That isn't fair to them. They wouldn't want me there. I can't stay there forever, but I couldn't be there long enough to get everything dealt with, so I was going to be able to hit the ground running. But what they did was they helped me get this job. They helped me clean up. They gave me an address. I could get the P.O. box, which, of course, Governor Tim Walz took away with his stupid stay-at-home order. So once again, I don't have an address. So if I lose this job, I can't go out and get another job. I'll be committing a felony if I get a job, if I apply for a job. That family was so good to me. That one pastor at that one church who gave me the money when my car died at work, and he gave me the money to get my car towed back to the other city to my mechanic. The only way I could possibly afford to fix the car. What a beautiful, wonderful thing that man did. And I've had a couple people here and there who've done nice things for me. I've said in a recent video how the police came up and gave me a generous gift, and just showing me that they cared meant so much to me. Folks, I can count those events over the last 7 years, not just on 10 fingers, but you gotta take some fingers away. It's something more like this. Out of 7 years and 5.5 million Minnesotans. Yes, every one of them is complicit in this. It's called negligence. As in negligent homicide. These people I've gone to for help, even when it's their job to do so, when they're paid to do so and they refuse it, they lie, they deceive, they take money, they exploit people in situations like mine, and worst of all probably is they blame the victim. They try to get away with it by blaming the victim. And folks, one of the things, when this first happened to me, one of the things I did was I went out and studied all these people, especially children, now grown, but children who were kidnapped, like Elizabeth Smart and things like that. These people, and adults, but people who are falsely imprisoned and become sex slaves, trafficking, things like that. Every one of them complains, for the most part, they complain about people blaming the victim. Well, if he hadn't been wearing those clothes, he wouldn't have chloroformed you and threw you in his truck and threw him in a dungeon. It's your fault for wearing those clothes. These people are nuts. These Minnesotans are batshit crazy. Blaming the victim? Every one of these people who suffered from these horrific traumas, like I have, of being abused and molested and raped, brought this close to death, they all report other people because they don't feel comfortable hearing about it. Don't talk about the rape, Jane. Don't talk about it. It makes us uncomfortable when you talk about the rape. Never mind how uncomfortable you feel inside thinking and reliving that rape over and over and over and over again. Like I relive living in that apartment, that terrorist cell. Over and over and over. You don't get it off your chest by talking to us, your family, or your friends, or your pastor, or your church, or your community, or your city council. You don't talk about that. You don't talk about the rape. You just pretend it never happened, and you deal with it inside. That's what all these people keep saying, folks, and that's exactly what I've experienced in Minnesota. Because these videos talk about it, and how much do these people hate me for making these videos. I have single-handedly exposed what just about every transplant in Minnesota has been complaining about all along, which is the horrific, inhumane treatment they get from these Minnesotans. If you're not one of them, if you're not one of their cult, if you don't play ball with these people, you're as good as dead. They will destroy you. They will leave you for dead. That's exactly what's happened. My life ended when I became homeless. My life was cut short when I became homeless. My life was taken away from me when I became homeless. Since I became homeless, my life has not been worth living. And folks, this is the honest to God truth. hand on Bible. This is the honest to God truth. My perception of the last several years in this car has been this. I am doing nothing except waiting to die. Religiously, I am not allowed to self-terminate. If I were allowed to, you would have not had the last 200 videos here. Because I would have said, you people, you just take this world and jack each other over all you want. I'm out of here. But I'm not allowed to do that religiously. My job is to stay here and to endure and to keep talking, telling the truth. That's what God has told people to do. Endure. Don't kill yourself. Endure. And speak the truth. And that's what I've done in these videos. But through it all, I'm just sitting here waiting to die. I'm just longing, praying, hoping, wishing that today's the day I just die. And it's not because I want to die or I want to leave this world. It's because I don't want to live another day like this, where my life was taken away from me. If I was still in my home like I was 7 years ago, I would want to be living for another 100 years. These people took my life. They murdered me. And every single one of them got away with it.